Hello and welcome to Lewis Nichols Live Stories in association with Shane Solomon. And I'm really excited today because I think you're the most decorated guest we've ever had on the show. I mean, the achievements is phenomenal. So Steve Redgrave, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Lewis.
How are you finding it so far in Cornwall?
No, it's been looked after extremely well. Been very, very good. Nice, relaxing weekend. Haven't been doing too much. My wife dragged me along the coastal walks yesterday, which was more up and down than
5 miles.
Getting any distance.
And you've had the nicest weather I think any guest has had so far.
It's always nice in Cornwall, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I think we'd all disagree. It's a lot of rain normally. But we've got a lot to go through because it's got live stories. So we're going to start at the very beginning for you to where you're at now. And we're going to cover a lot of your achievements. But I wanted to go back to the beginning, which is kind of, were you always sporty when you were growing up? Was it something that kind of ran in the family?
I was reasonably sporty. Coming from a working class background is that of state schools, it was difficult compared to, especially in the sport of rowing, in some ways that I got myself into. But I was a reasonable sprinter. I think I won the Cubs Championship, district championships and things like that. But it wasn't until really I found the sport of rowing that I really started to sort of find my niche in some ways.
And what was it about rowing that you liked? Because when I've seen it, for instance, on TV, it's quite intense. So what was it what did you get from rowing? How did it make you feel?
Heavily dyslexic, so going to school I hated, and to row you had to leave school, so or leave school premises. So the head of the English department, a guy called Francis Smith, was the captain of Marlow Rowing Club, and he started a small boat club at the school, and just invited a few people to give it a go, and so for me it was literally of being able to get out of school during games lessons on a Wednesday afternoon to go rowing.
Because there is a stigma, isn't there, with dyslexia? A lot of people think, they say to you, oh, you could still make something. They assume that it's kind of something that will prevent you from succeeding. But the most successful people in the world are dyslexic. So were you ever told that, look, you might not achieve what you want to? Did anyone ever say that, or did you have support from people from the start?
I had reasonable support from the primary school that I was at. It was a new school in Marlow Bottom where I still live now. So my first year at the first 2 years at the primary school, I was in Marlow itself, and then this new school opened right next to where we were living with my parents. And the headmistress sort of knew that I had difficulties, that the word dyslexia was used, but it didn't really mean very much to me. My father was self-employed by that time as a builder, so I always thought I would follow in his footsteps. So it didn't really worry me too much of what my of exam results were going to be. I was reasonably comfortable within the situation that I was in. Having two elder sisters, one's 9 years older, and the other one's 5 years older, and follow them into the same comprehensive school as I went to, that I think they must have ruffled a few feathers, because I was bullied a little bit the first couple of years, but the size I am, that didn't last very long.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that would have lasted. Were your sisters sporty as well?
Reasonably. My dad always talks about that he was a reasonable runner. I don't think my mother really did anything. She was originally from Birmingham. My eldest sister was quite a good runner as well, and my other sister was a very good backstroke swimmer. We had an outdoor pool at our school, which was normally green most of the time. So it was never in use when I came through that school. But that pool doesn't exist now. But so they were reasonable. But as soon as they had the opportunity of giving up sport and doing other stuff, they did. Where sort of for me, it sort of went in the opposite direction.
So how does it go from doing rowing to kind of get out of school to then kind of, that's your career, there's belief behind you, you're going to the Olympics. So how does that transition happen from just doing it for something that you love to then suddenly being what you're known for?
The school boat club had, when I was at the 4 years of students there was a maximum of 12 people that rowed. When we were in the last 2 years at school, there was nobody the year below us, and then 8 people that rowed 2 years below me at school. And that we're attached to Marlow Rowing Club, and Marlow Rowing Club had one very successful lightweight rower that became world champion. And we had 3 coaches that were coaching internationally. And so sort of from the age of, I started when I was 13, nearly 14. By the age I was 15, 16, those coaches and some of the members at the club saying, "Oh, you're capable of being a world champion." You think, world champion, that sounds nice. Why world champion? Why not Olympic champion? So I sort of focused myself quite at a young age that I would get through to that sort of level. At that stage, sport-wise, throughout the whole of the country, we weren't doing very well at all, Olympic level, or most of our other sports as well. So there wasn't really a path to follow. We had to forge a path. One of those coaches was a guy called Mike Sprackling that was attached to Marlow Rowing Club. He had a house on the river. He coached a double scull to a silver medal at the Munich Games in '76, and they became world champions the year afterwards. And so he had quite a good reputation of being able to coach at the highest level, and now is recognised as one of the all-time great coaches. And he was attached to my rowing club and coached me for the first half of my career at international level. So I had pretty good of elements of coaches in that early stage in the right direction. The sport was dominated by East Germany at that time, and so that it was the Western world trying to compete against East Germany.
You know, I'm someone, I don't know a lot in the sense of what goes into competing in the Olympics. So how does it work? How many months or years work goes in prior before the actual games?
I started in 1976 was my first year rowing. I just missed out on the Moscow Games, so 4 years later, 1980. And so that's quite unusual to, within 4 years of starting the sport, to get to that sort of level. That was a boycott year that the Soviet Union were put forces into Afghanistan. That was seen to be a bad thing at that particular time, even though we did it a number of years later, and that was seen to be acceptable. And so that was quite unusual to get to that sort of high level because of the boycott. America withdrew from the games, West Germany, of New Zealand, and most of our funding came from American-based companies. So as the British team, because our government doesn't support the Olympic teams right the way through. So the British Olympic Association is a private entity, where in most countries, I think all countries apart from 2, the British Olympic Association has their own independency. So when Margaret Thatcher didn't want us to go to the games in '80, is that we each sport had their own vote to see if they still wanted to go, and most sports did. I think there were 3 that decided that they couldn't go, and that was because they were more military based and they couldn't go against the government of the time. But we had that flexibility to be able to do that. So as a sport, we chose to go, but because then funding got reduced, we sent a smaller team. And of the selection policy, we had just made the criteria, but there wasn't enough funding to send us. So very disappointed that I didn't get to those games, which I would have been an 18-year-old of going to of the Moscow Games.
That's incredible, the story behind that. But, well, 4 years later, you got your chance. So how did you find out, or how did that conversation happen that, right, you're going to the Olympics?
Well, rowing's a training sport. The fitter you are, the more likely you're going to get better results. As I said before, that the sport was dominated by East Germany. In fact, the 14 gold medals at the Moscow Games, 12 of them went to East Germany. One went to Finland, one went to Bulgaria. So the sport was very much dominated by Eastern Bloc countries at that time. And they, especially East Germany, were sort of head and shoulders more advanced in their training, preparation, and the way that they focused themselves on sport. And even where we are now, I think at Olympic level, East Germany would still be third or fourth on the all-time gold medal tally within rowing at the Olympics, and they only competed for 4 games. So it's pretty incredible what they did in a short period of time.
I don't know if it's frustrating for you, but when the Olympics are on, I get so invested into various sports I wouldn't normally watch. And when I get into them, I think, oh, this should be on TV more. But actually, it is. I mean, rowing, especially, it's on TV. So does it frustrate you when people say, oh, I wish, that was on TV more, or we could see more of it, when actually it's available for people to see?
It is a bit frustrating in some ways, but then rowing's quite boring to watch, I think.
I don't know. It's
quite because it's a muscular endurance event. Is that it's quite predictable. So if it was seen more on TV, is that you could almost judge of who's going to win and who's not. And sport, you need that sort of dilemma of quite what the results may be. Whoever wins the first World Cup race of the season, if everyone's there racing and the results are sound, they tend to go on and win the next one, and then they become favourites to win the major championships of that year. As I say, because it's a training sport, you need time to make the difference. The rowing calendar's slightly changing this year. There used to be 3 World Cups over the last 25 years. That's been now reduced to 2. We have a major championships every year, so a World Championships apart from Olympic year. The year after Olympics, you tend to get some different results as the new intake of athletes coming in after people retire from the games. But something like 80% of the winners that win the World Championships the year before the Olympics will go on to win the Olympics. So that's when I say it's predictable.
Predict. Yeah. Well, when you represent your country, does that come with a completely different pressure than what you've ever experienced before? Because there's so much on that race, everybody's watching, we're hoping. So does it give you a pressure, or do you switch it off and get into a different mindset of just, I'm doing what I'm going to do, and that's try to win this race?
You always want to go into a race of being favourites to win. Like I said, with the 80% of the crews that win the World Championships go on to win the Olympics, people say, oh, I'd like to be the underdog. No. I'd rather be the 80% on my percentage chance of winning than 20% that have to overturn it. And so there's that element of wanting to be favourites in there. But there is a pressure towards it of 84, when I won my first Olympic gold medal, is that the BBC build up to that, as Des Lynam in the studio was sitting at his desk, and then he says, oh, we've got a chance of a medal at the rowing basin. We'll go across to Lake Casitas. And that was it. That was us on the start line for our final. And of course, we went on and won, where 5 games later in Sydney at my last games, is that there was a whole build up for weeks on end of building up to our final and our potential win. But then you're in your own little bubble at the Olympic Games. You're living in the village or close to the venue where you may be, and you don't see all that of pressure. You could sense there was something special happening back in the UK, building up to Sydney, but you're distanced from it. You don't really see it until it's all over. Coming back from LA. first games is that coming back through the airport at Heathrow, there was hardly anybody there. When we came back from
Really?
Sydney, it was absolutely heaving of people wanting
Yeah.
to be there, of the celebrations, the team coming back. The British team did pretty well, much better than it had done for many games. And so that was quite special from that point of view. And the team, rowing team and Olympic team, has been doing really well since that time. So we're getting a lot more success than we ever did.
You know, after winning your first Olympic gold medal, am I right in saying that you were considering to stop rowing? Because I watched various different interviews that you've done before, and you said you considered that.
Rowing still is relatively an amateur sport. That there's no prize money, there's no appearance money. We're quite lucky in this country that we're funded very well at the elite level now with lottery funding. That never really came into force when I was an athlete. That was just coming on board as I was retiring. And so that you had to rely on of earning some money to be able to keep yourself at the sport. My mother taught her 3 children to drive, and then taught herself to become a driving instructor to keep an income coming in to be able to keep me competing. So I had great family support from that point of view. But that has now been taken over by lottery funding. But as I say, there isn't any appearance money. There's no prize money within the sport. The sport is still struggling for finance within the sport across the world. And then that becomes harder to get athletes to the highest level to be able to compete and push the boundaries back further.
You mentioned your parents' support there. Now, a lot of people, when they say, I want to be this, I want to be that, they kind of say, why don't you get a trade? Why don't you get just in case? So how important was it to have that belief and support from the very start?
I think hugely. As I said, that having of 2 sisters and quite a big age gap, when my eldest sister left secondary school, my father asked her what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a beautician, and they helped her, supported her to go to college for a couple of years, and came out of that and then said, right, now you're going to go to work, because of the family background and of our process. My grandfather on my father's side was a cabinet maker, involved in the furniture industry. On my mother's side, my grandfather drove trams and buses in Birmingham for 40 years. And so it was very much sort of that was the process you do. You go through your education, then you go and find yourself a job. My father was the youngest of 3, had an elder brother and an elder sister, and by the sounds of it, my grandfather on his side was very strict, and all 3 of them wanted to get away from home as soon as they could. My uncle left home as soon as he could, cycled a bike around Africa, ended up in Florida and made that his home. My auntie stayed in Marlow, and my dad joined the Merchant Navy, travelled the world. When he came back, started a little bit of working on building sites, worked for the gas board, ended up setting his own business up as a builder, and that was the sort of path line that I thought I would follow. Soon after that, he loved market gardening and growing, so he built himself a garden centre. My eldest sister ran that for a number of years, and that was about the time that I was coming to leaving school. So I used to cut people's lawns, lay patios, and do all that as while I was still at school. So while I was at school, before I was driving, I had a reasonable amount of cash flow until you start driving, and that swallows it all up.
So very hard working family. You've been brought up with people that are just always work hard.
Yeah, I think I'm the laziest one in the family.
You know when, I don't know if you've been asked this before, but obviously you win your first gold. In your mind, was it ever, I want to win the most, or I want the record, or was it just, I'm going to go out there, win this race? Was it always just the race in hand that you were focused on rather than ongoing records?
From that sort of 16, 17-year-old that I said a bit earlier is that I thought I'd be able to go to 3 games. So the Moscow Games, which I didn't get to, LA, which I thought I might be able to win a medal, and then Seoul in '88, which is the one that I was going to win the gold medal. And that was sort of the loose plan as a sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old. Obviously, the first one didn't happen, and that sort of changed things. But the sport started to change at that time again. The dominance of the Eastern Bloc got broken, and I suppose I was part of some of that. And sport, especially Olympic sport, became more of a career path, even though you weren't earning, a career path that you could potentially follow. Governments wanted their Olympic teams to do well, so that of agencies like Sport UK, Sport England, the equivalent of the home countries, putting more focus into sport. So there was an opportunity of following that path line. And so the 3 games, once I didn't go to the Moscow Games, disappointed with that, winning my first games in LA, you think, yeah, I'll go on to Seoul and win that again. That's the time that I thought I was going to stop and get a proper job, whatever a proper job may be. And then you start thinking, well, why do I want to go and get a proper job? This is quite fun. The pushing the boundaries back within the sport. I didn't like the training because we used to train extremely hard, long hours. But I found the more you trained, the better success that you potentially could get. And I quite like winning. So why go and get a proper job when I can carry on trying to win the Olympics again?
Did you find the more that you did the Olympics, the more you saw popularity around rowing? So did you notice, like, the Heroes Welcome, for instance, at the airport, more people invested in that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Is that when I started rowing with Matt Pinsent, is that we became favourites to win. We won the World Championships, our second World Championships together, breaking the world record the year before the Barcelona Games. And again, there still wasn't a huge amount of publicity for my sport. The Moscow Games, Great Britain won 5 gold medals in total. LA, Great Britain won 5 gold medals. Barcelona, Great Britain won 5 gold medals. Atlanta, we only won 1. In my last games, 2000 in Sydney, I think we won 9 gold medals. It could have been 11. Age is getting to my brain now, so I can't really remember. But we've been winning more and more gold medals as a whole Olympic team going on. So it's been more of a career path, as I say, with lottery funding coming on. It is that you can make that a pathway of doing that. In those early days, athletics was a very amateur sport as well. In fact, all the Olympic sports were amateur until after the Seoul Games, when then you could be a professional athlete and still compete at the Games. So that was sort of 88, the change of that, or after 88, the change of that. And sports worldwide has changed from that point. And athletics now is a very career path to follow, which before that it wasn't. You did sport for a few years, hopefully get good results, and then you have to go and find a proper job to be able to pay the mortgage, start a family, and move further within the sort of what is expected of the way that people run their lives. And now, of where we are, of 2025, is that of kids coming through whatever schools, private schools or state schools, there is an opportunity. Thinking there is a pathway that you could be supported to compete doing a sport to a pretty high level.
Joe, I was talking to your brother-in-law earlier before the interview, and actually, when you look at how many years you competed, the kind of physical shape you would have had to have maintained is actually incredible. I mean, to be that fit and to be competing, I mean, I struggle walking up the stairs sometimes. So was that difficult the later part of your career, or did you not have any issues with that?
There's always issues that you've got to deal with it as you're coming through. I was probably ahead of the game. Physical demands of my father being a builder. I used to work with him on building sites as a landscape gardener. As when he had his market garden, then there's the physical side of that. If you go back 50 years before that time, is that in my sport you wouldn't have been able to compete within the sport. Because if you were a tradesman using your body to do your activity at work, if that was not pushing a pen around in an office or of a bank or a lawyer, you were classed as being a professional and weren't allowed to compete. Fortunately, all those boundaries got broke. But there was certainly an element of being able to. I can remember laying one patio where I live in Marlow Bottom. It is a valley. There's some pretty steep sides to it. So carrying 2-foot slabs with all the concrete and ballast and everything else that needs to the top of the hill, that is a form of training. So if at that time I was training twice a day, so I was actually training, doing the job that I was doing as well. That gave me sort of physical strength. And rowing, there is a physical element to it, and so that of somebody that's of doing maths or English or of banking or of whatever activity that they do at work, wasn't training the body, I had a slight advantage because I was training my body half the day within the work that I was doing. Once you then get to Olympic level, is that now that you're training 2 or 3 times a day, every day anyway. So that's gone from it. But that is part of the training process. But those people that have more of a physical background within my particular sport, is that gives you a little bit of a footing. And I had an advantage when it was those amateur days of the 70s and 80s.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, obviously you did rowing, you love it, it's your kind of big passion, but then...
I wouldn't say I loved it. But
really? You didn't love it?
It was a means to an end, is that, yes, I do love the sport, but you only compete 5 times a year, maximum, and you're training 49 weeks a year. That's a hell of a lot of training, 7 days a week of 2, 3, sometimes 4 training sessions in a day. That's a lot of preparation for very little fun. And I used to like the fun of competing. I would have liked to have competed every day, and that become part of the training.
So you tolerated rowing, but obviously with all the success that you have, fame comes with that. You know, people wanting to come and speak to you, having photos and knowing who you are. Did you ever struggle with that side? Just suddenly becoming famous, becoming so well known, being interviewed?
Yeah, that you become an overnight star. It only takes 20 years to do that. And 5 Olympics to be in that situation. Is that I remember being on the tube in London after the Atlanta Games, and the old-fashioned seats when they used to face each other, and the guy was reading a paper and peering over the top of it and sort of looking at me sort of knowingly and thinking what's going on, and then he would ask me a question. He said, were you at the NatWest conference in such and such? And you're saying, no, that wasn't me. And then they say, are you sure? And so there's a recognition. This is after 4 different Olympics I've been to. Coming back from Sydney is that then you were recognised immediately wherever you were, even in London, where everyone walks with their head down and doesn't take any notice of anybody in that situation. But an overnight success takes a hell of a long time.
That's so true, like 20 years to get there.
So in some ways, you get used to the whole situation. I can remember coming back from LA. We had an open-top bus through celebration in my hometown of Marlow. As we came through, the mayor walked in front of the open-top bus. And some of the colleagues that I rode with from different parts of the country, they're all part of that ceremony as well. And it was nice, but there were people just shopping and thinking, well, what's going on? Why is this bus coming along here? And there was a civic reception, and it was a great occasion. But then, sort of weeks, months later, you're chatting to people and saying, well, what do you do? So, well, I row. Oh, row? Who do you row for, Oxford or Cambridge? And you think, yeah, it's a slightly different level from that. I'm an Olympic champion. Oh, Olympic champion. You must have trained really hard the last 2 or 3 months for that. Oh. And you're thinking, no, that's probably the easiest time of all of it. And now that you look at the rowers, that we have a very successful team, or any of our sports stars, is that there is a knowledge now that of how much training preparation they have to do. And that's sort of more of the process of people getting used to of what sports people have to do to be at the top and pushing the boundaries back further.
You've been very open with your diabetes diagnosis. You know, I've seen you on TV shows kind of talking and raising awareness.
It's difficult not to when you get told that you've got diabetes and the journalist comes and knocks on your door the next night before you'd even told the family that you're a diabetic.
Really?
Yeah.
So they were trying to expose it before anyone else knew?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've never been shy about of when you're in the sporting arena, you're in the public eye. You would like to be in the situation of being able to control that in some ways. Having kids, young kids at that point, is that you should be able to be in control of how you want to tell your family, your wider family, and friends within that. I don't know how it was quite leaked, but a knock on the door of a journalist saying, "Oh, we hear you're a diabetic. How's that going to be to your career?" And you're thinking, "Okay, I haven't come to terms with it myself yet."
So then you were in a situation where you're forced to kind of tell everyone before you processed.
My health has been in the public eye.
Yeah.
So everyone knows more about it than I do.
But you know, when you first got your diagnosis, did you have a moment where you thought, well, that's my Olympic or rowing career over?
Yeah, no, totally. It was after a World Championships, 97, year after the Olympics, the Atlanta Olympics, the first year of rowing in the 4 on the build up to Sydney. Where we competed at the World Championships, broke the world record, putting our stall out that of Matthew and I trying a different category of boat, bringing on Tim Foster and James Cracknell, of building up to Sydney. We have 3 weeks off after a World Championships, and went away on holiday, came back from holiday. My original coach had a birthday celebration where he'd been coaching around the world after he's finished coaching me, went out to Canada, went to America, and so we had this lunch in Wallingford, and where a lot of the athletes that he'd coached came along and We went out in an 8 of different eras and different athletes. My daughter, eldest daughter, coxed that 8. So I think the first time that she'd ever been in a boat. Then said she'd never ever get in a boat again since that. She nearly kept that of going. She did a little bit of rowing when she was at university. But of a great celebration from that point of view. Now I've waffled on. I forgot what the original question was.
No, we were talking about. Did you think that was the end of your?
Yeah. And so that I had a grandfather, on my dad's side, that had diabetes in his late 60s, early 70s. That I was very young when he died, and that I knew that diabetes was in the family, but I never expected that I would come down with it. Of coming back from that holiday, that sort of celebration that I was just talking about with my previous coach, went training the next day, and I came back with a tremendous thirst, and which is unusual after training. We don't tend to have a glass of fluid. We tend to have a jug, and you just sort of drink a hell of a lot of fluid. But that then tends to quench your thirst. But I got home and I was still thirsty. When we go away to hot training camps, there were these urine dipsticks that we used to take to test our pH in our urine, to see, as an educational thing, of how dehydrated that we were the previous day. It's sort of back knowledge in some ways, but if you do it on a regular basis, you know that you've got to drink more from that. And that over the sheer length of time and the boredom, there's 6 different pads on these urine dipsticks, and one of them is about sugar in the urine. And I don't know why I actually I've tested it, but it came out positive, where normally you wouldn't get a reading at all. My wife, being the team doctor, that she used to row herself, she competed at the '84 Olympics, and then has been the team doctor ever since, still is. She says she's going to retire in 3 years after LA. So LA to LA, but we'll see when we get there if she does or not. I rang her up when she was at work, and she saw that I think you should go and make an appointment to see your GP. That was one of the advantages of being in a privileged sports position at the time. You could ring your GP and you could go and see them the next morning. So I went off to see him. Simple blood test, blood sugars through the roof. I was sent up to see the diabetic specialist at High Wycombe General Hospital, and my thoughts were, okay, 4 Olympic gold medals, 5 world championships. That's not a bad career. Diabetes is now you're not going to be able to compete at that sort of level. And I went up to see Ian Gallen. I spent 2 or 3 hours with him, going through the whole process, being taught how to inject insulin and what my lifestyle was going to be here. And I'm expecting him to tell me that this is it, that's the end of my career. And that's what I was expecting to hear. And at the end, he said, Steve, I know you want to carry on to Sydney in 3 years' time. I don't see any reason why you can't do that. And I'm here to help you if you want to follow that path. So really, it was his decision of saying that he could support me of being able to get there. Being a diabetic specialist, I thought he had all the answers. He didn't have a clue.
Really?
Didn't have a clue. I found out afterwards is that he'd searched the internet for sports and diabetics, and there was hardly any, and not much evidence on it. He was relatively a young consultant at the time, very forward thinking, and his attitude was, why not? Instead of, you can't do this. Where I'm thinking, he's going to stop me. I don't know if that would have stopped me, but that's what I was expecting to hear. And then when Ian said that he helped me through the process, and we started working together, my wife being the team doctor, we got a team together of my rowing coach, of psychologist, team doctor, diabetic specialist, sports nutrition, sports scientist, and went through the whole process of quite how we were going to do this and work towards it. And that was sort of the start of it. And I remember going to race for the first time, which was probably 5-6 months later from being diagnosed. And Ian talks about the Doctor Who moment. He was watching it on TV at home, hiding behind the sofa, thinking, what's going to happen in this race? He's convinced me that I've got no problem at all. I've got no worries of it. The actual racing was the easy part of controlling diabetes through the process. The hard bit was actually getting the training done to the level to be able to be at that level, and that was the hard part. But without Ian, without that team, I wouldn't have been able to compete at Sydney and win that fifth.
That's such a moment, because that must have been kind of emotionally and mentally exhausting to kind of accept, I probably won't compete now, that's the end of my career, to then be given this hope and like, oh, wow, okay, so it's business as usual type thing. You know, that must have been such a moment for you.
Well, in Olympic sport, you make a decision once every 4 years. Am I going to carry on? You don't carry on for world championships. You don't carry on for World Cup races. You carry on because of the Olympic Games. And so you're making that one choice that then putting you in a path line for the next 4 years. And then you make a decision at the end of it, am I going to carry on or not? And having a serious condition of diabetes being thrown into the pipeline is that you do question it. And I did honestly think that my career was probably going to be over. I hadn't heard of any of top sports people competing at the level they need to be, pushing back the barriers on a year-to-year basis to be able to stay at the level and be able to compete. So naturally, you think that that's probably going to be the end of the way. And then someone says, well, I can't see why you can't achieve your dreams in 3 years' time. And they think, okay, the game's back on.
So since then, have you had any other kind of sports stars or anybody that have come up to you and said, because of you and what you've done, who are also diabetic, they've gone on and had belief and carried on doing what they were doing? So have you kind of inspired other people and they've told you about it?
Definitely, there's been people inspired about it. There's only one other rower that I know of that's competed with diabetes, and he was actually a Canadian, coached by my original coach that coached me to my first two Olympics. He became world champion. He didn't become Olympic champion. There was an American sprint swimmer that won an Olympic gold medal as a diabetic. Everyone has slightly different issues with different conditions, and it's of the path you have to try and follow. I suppose at the Beijing Games 2008. That there was a single sculler from Norway that he rang me up out of the blue and he said, I'm really struggling with training. It's not going quite the way that I think it should be. Can I come and have a chat with you? No, he didn't have diabetes. He was just sort of struggling mentally, and I invited him over with his coach. We sat down for a few hours. Chatted through him, took him back to the airport, and he flew back to Norway, and he went on to win Olympic gold medal in the men's single. And I was working for the BBC, interviewing people as they come off the water, mainly the British team, and Olaf came off the water. And he said, Steve, without you, I've done it. Right in front of the BBC cameras, where we've got a British single sculler competing at the time in the same race. And I'm thinking, should be helping my own team, not of other teams. The mental strength that you go through then can sort of spill across to other sports. And I have helped a number of different sports and athletes achieving their goals, not with the same condition as I have, but the processes are pretty similar.
What does that mean to you that you've had the ability to help someone else? Do you get a certain feeling, or does it just feel good?
It's that every generation the athletes get stronger and better. Of the records that I set up with of training preparation on the rowing machines and stuff like that have all been smashed. Every world record I have has been broken since that. It's nice of having those records, but if you can help somebody else get to that level, there is a nice satisfaction of having a small part in somebody else's career, of getting to them achieve their dreams.
Well, the year 2000, I mean, that was a big year for you for various reasons, but your retirement, that must have been a very difficult decision. I mean, how did you find that, and how did you come to the decision to retire?
Well, we talked a little bit before about of not getting very much publicity for the sport. Because Matthew and I were the only gold medalists of the British team in every sport to win a gold medal in Atlanta, then there was even sort of more focus on us moving forward and what we were doing. And then within that 3 years of coming down with the diabetes, is that, as I say, rowing tends to be a pretty consistent sport. In the 4 years of rowing that four, we only lost 2 races. One of them happened to be the last race before the Olympic Games in 2000. And suddenly I remember James Cracknell couldn't understand of why the media had suddenly turned on me, is that before it was always about of what Redgrave was doing rowing wise, and whatever crew that he was rowing had a chance of winning. Matthew had become an outstanding athlete by that time, and was head and shoulders better athlete than I was at that time. So I was thankful I could hold on to his coattails and be dragged along with his performance. But we lost the last international regatta going in, and the headlines in the paper are, Redgrave's too old, he can't do this with the illness he's got, and all doom and gloom. We'd lost one race in 3 years, 2 races in the 4 years in that rowing cycle, and suddenly it was about how we weren't going to achieve. What that defeat did is really focused us as athletes to make sure that the 2 months that we had left from that race going forward, that we made sure that every stone was unturned of making sure that we could get success. Obviously that success came, but that also helped our opposition as well, because one of the things that Matthew and I worked on was every race was important. Of course, you want to win every race, but we were sort of conditioning our opposition that they were fighting for a silver medal or a finalist place. Yeah. The gold medal had been taken away. If you lose the last race going into Olympic Games, then suddenly thinking, well, they can get it wrong. We do have a chance, and that raised their game as well. So it helped us in some ways of refocus, but I think it helped our opposition as well. It was a very close race. The Italians were 0.38 of a second behind us over just under 6 minutes of racing. So it's a pretty tight finish. Slovenia were 4th within that race. They had the fastest last 500, last quarter of the race, faster than anybody else at all. They were pushing the Australians, so the Australians pushing the Italians. That constituted the whole race up, and then suddenly that's over. I knew that I was going to retire at that stage. I'd made a statement 4 years before at Atlanta: if anyone sees me near a boat, they've got my permission to shoot me. Which then has stuck with me for the rest of my life. There's hardly a day that goes past I don't hear that statement. So at Sydney, I definitely weren't going to make any rash statements and abide my time before I make the announcement. But I knew in my heart of hearts that was going to be it. And then you've got to then refocus of what you're going to do. That's what I did for 20, 25 years, international for 20 years, in the sport for 25 years. Fortunately for me is that within months of coming back from Sydney, is that the chief executive and the chairman of the British Olympic Association invited me down to London. We sat outside a cafe and they said, we're thinking about bidding for the Olympics. Do you want to come on board to help? There's 3 of us at the moment. Will you be the fourth team member to come on board? Which for me was no brainer. So a lot of athletes, sports people, because you retire relatively young in your lifespan, but your competitive of career is over. Then you've got, it's not like retiring from work, where your last day of working tends to be a celebration of your working life and whatever retirement brings to you. I was 38. I pushed the limits within the sport and the age. There's very few athletes that compete in their 40 in their 40s in rowing. There's 1 or 2, but not many. And so there's an emptiness. There is a sort of a wilderness of quite what you're going to do with the rest of life. And for me, I was quite lucky that London 2012 took over that. And even though I wasn't competing, the Olympic dream kept going, and I could focus on trying to help. 1, if we would put a bid together. 2, of then putting that bid and develop it into the Olympics that we saw. But when that cauldron went out, I was 50 in 2012. When the cauldron went out at the Paralympics, I was watching the closing ceremony at home, and then there was a sort of a physical depression that I went through 12 years later than it should have happened, retiring from sport, and it probably took a long time to come to terms with that. Blokes are not very good at of addressing, especially mental health issues, and I got to terms pretty quickly with it. I think it took me 9 years before I actually went and spoke to my GP about the mental health issues that I was going through and processes, of dealing with that. But that's some of the problems when you're involved in a high pressure, high process environment of what you deal with at relatively a young age.
You know, when you said then, obviously 12 years later than what you kind of expected it would have been 2000, that you would go through that depression. I didn't
think there'd be any depression at all, that you just think it's a matter of fact, you move on to the next thing. But there is certainly a void and an emptiness that I wasn't expecting.
Do you think, on reflection, everything you've done, there's always an end goal? So when there's a race, the end goal is to win the race. And then with getting the Olympics to the United Kingdom, the end goal is to make that happen. So did you feel there's no end goal anymore? There's nothing for me to actually do and achieve?
Yeah, I feel that I always need a challenge of some sort, enough to sort of get you out of bed, to sort of move you forward to what you need to do. I set up my own charitable trust, raised 5 million. I ended up being over £5 million, but that was the target I set myself, to try and raise £5 million in 5 years to achieve that. I need targets to work towards, and if I don't, then you tend to drift, and drifting is not very good.
I mean, with mental health, I've been through it, and a lot of people in here probably have, and it's normally the people you're closest to, your partners or family, that notice it kind of before you do. They'll notice a change in behaviour. So is that the case for you? With the people around you, did they notice that you weren't quite yourself?
When When you're married to the team doctor, that she's been pretty good with all the different illnesses that I've had through my life. If they were serious enough, that she was on top of them pretty quickly, getting me to see the right specialist at the right time to get me back on track. But mental health, I think, is pretty tough. And when she is still the team doctor to the team, she's looking after young athletes and old codgers, perhaps not the same sort of focus as before. But and I think it's really difficult of addressing those type of issues. I'm quite a reserved person in some ways, quite a quiet person. So she sees a different side to me than most people see. So she was aware of issues going through. But you think and you deal with day-to-day life as it comes through. But there wasn't really any time saying, right, you need to go and get some help on this.
Did you find any coping mechanisms? And if so, what were they? What kind of helped you and navigate you through that?
Well, as it's turned out to be, which is quite odd actually, is that the chief executive of the British Olympic Association, he moved on to a number of roles afterwards from leaving the British Olympic Association. And he's been part of a company called Ted's Health, and that's looking at testosterone. Testosterone as an athlete is a bad thing. It's on the anti-doping list that you can't take. I've been tested many times throughout my career of anti-doping tests, but you're never told of what your levels are. I guess my testosterone levels as an athlete were in the normal range because it's never came out of being too high, because you would realise that because you would have been informed about that. I don't know if they were too low because you wouldn't be informed from that. But he suggested that of mental health, of as a male, your testosterone does decrease the older you become. That's a natural process. But mine had dipped down more than it should have done. And the last couple of years, I've been on testosterone in injections, and I think that's helps my energy, my focus of dealing with of everyday life, and it's something that I promote quite heavily within the male population. Is don't sit around for 9 years thinking about what you're going to do something about it. And it may not be testosterone, it may be something different. But don't sit about it, do something about it. For me, it was a simple blood test, and it's pointed me in the right direction. Women tend to talk about their health a lot more than blokes do. Blokes, we take the mickey out of each other more than anything else, and that's not always the best case. So as we should be a little bit more positive to our fellow males, but we want to take the mickey more than of dealing with the issues. Friends that I play golf with and associate with, I'm still the same as I would have been an athlete. You're still taking the mickey in some ways of the situation instead of addressing the issues that it should be addressing.
It seems to be getting better because there's a lot of shows on TV now, and I mean you've got loose women, but they do loose men, and you have a panel and they're open and they talk about it, and I think there seems to be a movement which is good, where people are more comfortable to talk to their friends, and there's no embarrassment or no stigma there anymore. I mean, it's definitely there, but it's getting better.
Yeah, no, definitely. That I think that the modern man, whatever that may be, is that we're not seen to be as butch and as the breadwinner as traditional males been. We've been sort of suppressed in some ways of our natural makeup, and rightly so, of a fairer, equal society. But men do have that quite hard to come to terms to what our fathers' figures were beforehand, and what we should be of being more sensitive. My wife would say I'm not sensitive, but there is that. I know Bear Grylls quite well, and he's very much into men's mental health and of the sort of going on that bandwagon of making sure that we should be a little bit more open and discuss more freely about the situations that we deal with in modern world.
I would love to ask you, because I am a massive fan of the royal family, and of course receiving your knighthood. So I wanted to go back to that day and your memories of that, receiving it. So could you remember when you found out you were going to get knighted and then going to receive it?
New Year's Honours List of 2001, that you do receive a letter beforehand saying that you've been nominated for an honour. If you were given this honour, would you accept it? And then you don't hear anything more until the New Year's or the birthday honours list comes out. And I think that it was pretty well muted that there was the chance of a knighthood that was going to be bestowed upon me. There was a lot of pressure, as I understood, that as I came back from Sydney, that it should have happened. And they said, that's not the way that we do it. But Sir Walter Raleigh was knighted on his return from his travels. So there was a legacy that, but that didn't happen. It was pretty common that it was probably going to be the case in those honours list. The actual day was May the 1st of 2021. 2001, which there were riots in London that day. So we travelled down as a family. I had received an MBE and then upgraded to a CBE before that, so it was my third time of going to the palace for the honour. The first time you were only allowed to take 2 guests. That's pretty tricky. I wasn't married at the time, but going out with Anne at that time. I think my parents thought that it should be them that went along. I took my mother and my wife to be for that first honour. The CBE, that was given by the Queen. The CBE was Prince Charles, as he was then, and the knighthood was also done by the Queen. Very special day. For the knighthood, you're allowed to take 3 guests.
Okay.
So again, you've got to say it. And I got pictures of the rest of the wider family of outside Buckingham Palace, basically poking their heads through the railings outside. But a good celebration of recognition. But I suppose as a Redgrave growing up, my parents, we are related to the acting side of the family, even though I can't act at all. And so Michael Redgrave was always talked about in family occasions and of that side of the acting family. So I think the knighthood was very special for me and for my wife and my kids, but so much more for my parents. Of your offspring going on to achieve something like that and then being recognised for it is pretty special. Also, returning from Sydney, I remember my dad saying, "Oh, Marlow want to put a statue up of you in our hometown." Born and bred in Marlow in Buckinghamshire. And I said, I don't want a statue. So, and my dad got quite upset, which is he's pretty laid back and quite quiet. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, statues are dead people. And it was pointed out a few months later saying, well, yeah, most statues are of people that are dead, but the fact is the statue will probably be around a lot longer than you'll ever be. So that will be a case that would be. So eventually I did agree to it, and that was unveiled by the Queen and the Duke on the Golden Jubilee. And again, a great celebration. But I always lose my tracks. But going back to where I was saying the celebrations in Marlow when I won my first Olympic gold medal, we had an open top bus for the Sydney 4 after 2000, and the town was absolutely packed. So the shoppers were thinking, what's going on here? Everyone knew what was going on, and the celebrations were pretty amazing. And that's how sport has changed, and also sport has changed so the sort of the overnight success in some ways, it sort of drips in of games after games. If you win a lot of races and keep pushing it forward, you get recognised for those processes.
Do you ever sit back and just reflect and think, wow, I mean, when you look at everything you've achieved, you know, the knighthood, BBC Sports Personality of the Year, you've won everything you could. Do you ever reflect and think, I've done all right?
Very rarely. I'm always looking forward to what may be next. And now I'm well into my 60s, is that I'm not quite sure what is going to be next. Helping bringing the London Olympics was pretty special. Of achievements, the charitable trust, of part of bringing sport relief and the money raised by of that was pretty special. So I've been involved in some pretty special things, but I very rarely look back. It's always looking forward.
Well, dancing on ice this year, that was a shock when you and the outfits.
Shock to you. It was the biggest shock to me, especially how bad I was at it as well.
I didn't expect you to do the show, but you were having fun, and the public really got behind you. So what made you say yes? Because I know you had said no previously. You've been asked and you actually turned it down. So did Torvill and Dean have a bit of a hand in you doing this?
It was their 40th anniversary last year of winning their Olympic gold medal from Sarajevo. Their first gold and my first gold were in the same year. Winter Games used to be in the same year as the Summer Games. And so our paths have crossed. And Chris has asked me a number of times if I would consider doing it. And I've always said no. But I suppose this time around is that I was asked by the show if I would do a video link in, because the show last year would have been while their 40th anniversary was on in February of the show. And they asked me if I would have come on and congratulate of them of 40 years on of what they achieved. At the end of the interview, I said to them, I suppose you're going to ask me to come on the show now. And I don't think it was actually crossed their mind. But because I mentioned it, they said, oh, yeah, no, we could do that. I had been chair of Henley Royal Regatta for 10 years. It came to the end of last summer. So I found a little bit more time on my hands, and it was an opportunity to do a show on those sort of lines. I didn't think I would be very good, but I didn't think I would be quite as bad as I was. Because of the age and respect that the show had, I don't think that they really wanted me to be too flamboyant. But it was a hell of a lot of training. I did over 100 hours of ice training. Yeah. With all the other stuff that goes on around it as well. It is a huge commitment. It's 2 hours a day, every day for 3 months of basic training to get you to the show. And then once the show starts, that's for 5 days a week. When the show starts, then it's still the 2 hours a day, but it's for 6 days a week. I thought I would be okay. I thought I tend to, whatever sport I do okay at it. And I think that's the nature of rowing, because it's more of a fitness sport. So of just sheer enthusiasm and fitness gets you a reasonably way. 25 years on from retirement, I'm certainly not fit, carrying too much weight. Flexibility, rowers aren't really known for their flexibility. And skating, you've got to have a reasonable amount of flexibility as well. I thought I was going to be, I didn't think I'd get eliminated first, but I knew I wasn't going to go on and win the show either. So there was a realistic element of it. And then after the basic training, which I was training at Slough ice rink, Michaela Strachan and Charlie Brooks was training at roughly the same times as I was as well. I knew that Michaela was head and shoulder better than Charlie and myself. Charlie was next, and I was there. But then you think the females have a slight advantage in the earlier times because of their male pro skater can physically hold them up and get them to the first stage quite well. Michaela's got a dancing background, so she had that poise and elegance to start with. Charlie and I found it a little bit harder, and I thought, well, perhaps it's a bloke thing, that my time I will get better as we go on. And with the show, that they're overly positive of what you're doing. It's well documented on Strictly of how there was some bullying that was going on from the pro dancers to their celebrities about how much training they had to do. It was fit. Everyone had to do the same amount of training within dancing on ice. Which, if you're at the bottom, how do you get any better? You've got to put more time in. We weren't allowed to do that. But after the 3 months before we break for the Christmas break, where the studios where it was filmed, the training ice had been finished, and you do your first routine. You've got about 6 weeks to learn your first routine. After that, if you get through, you've got 5 days to learn your next routine, which is different of a process and intensity to it. But then we have this of show and tell, where we show everyone else our routines. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to be the worst. And then we showed everybody, and I was amazed of how some of the other male contestants were head and shoulders better than I was. And it was very obvious that I was at the bottom of this list, and thinking, how the hell am I going to try and get back? I'm not going to be able to get votes on my skating skills. I've got to entertain people, and it's not my of nature to be that entertainment and flamboyant. And so that first song that I did was "Don't Rock the Boat, Baby." They always tend to have a theme to your background, and obviously "Don't Rock the Boat." And they wanted me to have more of a Henry Royal Regatta blazer. Well, that's what I have to wear every Henry Royal Regatta. That's not out of my comfort zone. And when it came to the costumes, I said, well, I thought you'd be putting me in a sailor's costume of some sort. My son is now 27. He was 26 at the time. He was on jury service, was back at home living with us for the 2 weeks that he was on there while he was there. The start of my routine, there's a boat which you're told about, and they say it's going to be pulled out of the way, and you start your routine from there. The audience would see what I'm wearing beforehand, and I'm saying, well, okay, I need to make people laugh. I need to put smiles on people's faces, so they might consider voting for me. It's not going to be my skating skills. So I said to him, I've got this idea of this sailor suit that I'm going to wear. What happens if I wear shorts? And when this boat gets revealed, and he started laughing. And I thought, if I can make a 26-year-old laugh, then I've got a chance. And so that's how it. So I had quite a lot of say in that process. It was great fun. Then being the godfather, the second week, the dress rehearsal, literally 2 hours before the show goes live. Your props that you only get 2 days before, so you're just doing your routines in training gear, not in the sort of full dress. And we had this chair that was fixed on the ice, and the table would slide, and we moved it around. Vicky Ogden, my professional skater, and myself before we started the routine. But the table we got to practice with on the Friday. We got the chair on the Saturday, and as I say, this chair was fixed. On the Sunday for the dress rehearsal, 2 hours before the live show, I had this sort of practice where I was with the table, pretending that I was leaning on the table. When it actually came to it, is that you couldn't sit back in the chair because the table's too far away from you. You had to get right on the edge of there. And I was there, the music started, and the cushion slipped up, and I slipped underneath there. And I'm thinking, well, this is a dress rehearsal. We'll start again. I thought, no, it's a dress rehearsal as live on the show. The 2-hour show is done as live as the practice. I think I've got to get up. And we got through the routine, the moving the desk, sliding the desk around. We obviously couldn't do, and everyone thought I'd get really annoyed. I was just killing myself laughing. It was so funny, and that was probably the highlight of the show.
It's good that you had fun, and that's a big part.
It was a great experience. Vicky was brilliant. Her and her family had an amazing time. And it was like going back of being an athlete, but without being skilled at the process of consistent training, of a routine that's what I did for 25 years of my life. Getting back into that was quite fun in some ways, but a little bit disappointed of being voted out. But after the show, of knowing that you're getting the worst scores from the judges, and then somebody else being knocked out, as a sports person, that was quite hard, because you win or lose races on your own performance. Of my judging was being judged down, but the public were keeping me in, which is good fun. But yeah.
Well, Steve, I want to say thank you so much for giving me your time today. The stories and just your life in general is incredible. So thank you for being so generous to give me your time today. And I think everyone's enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Steve Redgrave.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.